Right. We are live for another episode of the Bitcoin Breakdown. A little early today, just a few minutes early, kind of make up for the fact that we're always late. I feel like it's always some problem with Facebook. It's always a few extra minutes that I don't anticipate for. So now I overcompensated. Uh, but looking at the price of Bitcoin, we're right up at about 6,600 still kind of holding that bottom that we've been talking about for the last, I don't know, about a month now.
Yep.
Feels like, and probably more than that, right? I mean, it's been bouncing right below six, staying at six, bouncing up and down in this range where people are, there are definitely some winners here. It's staying in this range for a reason, right? People don't want it to leave. They're capitalizing on all these intraday moves, I think. But I don't know if you got anything to say about the current price, but that's kind of what I'm just seeing.
No, I think that it's just I don't remember if you were talking in the room. Someone was talking about that basically all this is just really cementing in this idea that there's this base being built around 6,000.
Mm-hmm.
And that it lends more confidence to the market space as a whole. And it just makes it that much more likely for things to accelerate quickly out of it. Once we do kind of see that volume really start coming back in. I know that last week, we had that really weird, I don't know if it was a short hunt or what was that, the 19th, where we saw that big candle down and then immediately within like 10 minutes, it shot up like $400.
They overplayed themselves there.
Yeah. And so, I mean, sadly, we did see a little bit of volume follow through with that afterwards that pushed it up to, over 6,600. And now we're just kind of coasting. And so it will be interesting to see kind of what happens this week, whether we see it pull back or just keep going sideways. Either way, I'm not too worried about it.
Yeah. So. And either way, I think you kind of really, it's that whole idea of, you got to realize that if you're trading or investing, because last year we were just at about 3,900. So 3,900 price wise.
Oh, yeah.
So we're still looking pretty good.
Wait, yeah. Everyone that complains about, it's all going down. It's like, if you were in this last year, you're doing great.
Exactly. Yeah.
So if you bought a 20, you're in Hertzville, but.
Wow. I mean, I bought a little bit up there, when it was getting higher, but I mean that, you just gotta, it's risk management.
Yeah.
You don't put everything in there. But we had a pretty interesting news weekend. We had the SEC postponed the ETF decision, which weirdly enough, I think might have kind of like excited some people, and that move up that kind of coincided with that whole rally with Ripple and everything. Maybe just because it wasn't flat out denied, even though it probably will be denied. It's just maybe people were thinking, it's a little bit more of a longer shot here. And something interesting I was reading about, someone put two to two together, that this ETF decision date is in December, which coincides almost to the week after all of the Mt. Gox Bitcoins are distributed. So that $1 billion worth of Bitcoin is going to be sent out to everyone right as the ETF decision comes a week later. So I think it's kind of interesting just because that might crush the price and sell off to a lot of, people that want to, accumulate here. They want a better price and they want more Bitcoin. So that kind of coincides well, possibly. And then the ETF gets approved. There's $1 billion of Bitcoin exchanged, most likely to these bigger players that have been waiting for things like that. And it's just a great buying opportunity for institutions, which I thought was kind of interesting.
It could be a huge V bottom right there, just based off of that. But the other thing that is interesting is that, the past several times now that we've had ETF news, it's always been met with doom and gloom, sell-offs, and just lots of negativity in the space. And it seems like this last one, everyone's like, oh, it's just that again. It did almost nothing to the price in a negative way, which I think is a good sign that people are kind of realizing that the ETFs aren't as big as they make them out to be.
Mhm.
But that being said, it's just really, like I said, it's building more credibility to that base that's been building. Now, if we break that, then everything kind of goes to crap real fast. But I don't know. Even then, I think that would be a huge buying opportunity if we did somehow break 6K, like 5,800 to 6K, where we've had that floor since essentially the beginning of the year. If we went below that, I think that we'd see a pretty sharp drop and then a really big rebound off of it, just because there's so many people that are waiting to get in.
Mhm.
And like all the people are like, oh, if we hit 5K, I'll buy. It's like, okay. So I'm sure there's plenty of people lined up if that is the case.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, and it also lines up end of November, I think, is when Bakkt is supposed to launch the platform, which a lot of people kind of going back and forth. How important is an ETF when something like that, is going to, is going to have that, custody solution with partnerships such as I tweeted it out. I thought it was pretty interesting. I never knew Starbucks. I guess it makes sense when you think about it. But Starbucks has double the amount of transactions as like Google Play, Apple Pay, both of those. It's the biggest app purchasing consumer
yeah,
facing app.
no,
I
it
mean,
doesn't surprise me at all. If you think of just everything kind of revolves around their Starbucks app now, and there are a lot of regulars
yeah,
that's
I don't know. I wasn't able to find anything on the transaction value of how much value is transacted, just the amount of transactions, which makes
yeah.
sense if you're going for your daily coffee or something. But I thought that was pretty interesting, just because you don't really think about how important Starbucks and like Microsoft, their initial partners, were when they're going to launch a platform. But I mean, that's pretty big. I mean, Starbucks has said that's what they want to pursue, is going away from they want to pursue different options. I mean, if that means Bitcoin, scanning a Bitcoin app for your coffee, I mean, until Lightning gets here, I think that's a pretty good option for a lot of people. It's not the preferred option, but until the technology's there, I mean, what other choice do people have?
Yeah, true.
Well, that was interesting. And kind of going on the same lines, it's kind of funny seeing Ripple. What did it go back down? How far did it go back down after we were talking? You're like, oh no, it's going to head right back down. I mean,
Yeah,
you easily retrace 60%, right? 70% maybe?
yeah. Well,
Half
so
the move.
let's
Yeah.
see.
It looks like it was about half the move of that. Just right back down.
Yeah, because I think it topped out around. Let me look here.
Which it looks like this is where you'd want to get back halfway on that wall if it was anything other than Ripple. But
Yeah, true. And it's been going very sideways too since that initial pullback. But I think it topped out around like 74,
mhm.
75 cents on some exchanges. And now we're back down to, like 50 to 52. So that's a pretty significant pullback. And I thought that it was very funny that everyone was talking about, oh, Ripple's crushing Ethereum. It's now the number 2, and it lasted for all of like 2 hours. But
And
everyone was more than happy to jump on that for news and just be like, oh, Ethereum's gonna die to
I know,
Ripple.
right?
It's
And
like,
that's because that's the important thing, right?
yeah,
But anyway, and then I thought we kind of talked about this a lot when the mainnet was launching, but EOS has kind of been quiet, so
no,
quiet in the fact that transactions are down 87% in the last month alone. So being down 87% in a month for transactions, that doesn't make sense unless there was, some sort of, fake, wash volume, or, some sort of bots on the net, using some sort of artificial stats, creating some sort of artificial stats. I don't understand how something drops off 87% in a day, which I think kind of just goes along the lines of, I hate being so negative, but I mean, I think it's important that you kind of base your trading and investments around around something that's actually solid, and you need to apply risk management if the fundamentals aren't there. I mean, look what we saw with Ripple, went to for $3 to dropped 80 something percent, and
oh,
it
I think it was
might
even
not
more
come.
than that. It
Yeah.
was at like 350 or something, and
Mhm.
then dropped all the way down to 20, 25 cents, something like
Yeah.
that. It was
Mhm.
huge. Huge
Yeah,
pull.
and I try to look a little bit more far in the future too, because I only really like trading around confidently, trading around things with a larger position if I actually like the project. I can't trade anything with real volume on EOS or Ripple. You know, I mean, Ripple could have a news item that could destroy the whole coin in a day. It could be gone, or EOS could have another bug and it'd be worthless the next day.
Yeah.
So how do you trade that around? As when you're so focused on like being risk adverse as a trader or investor, I can't rationalize trading something like that.
Yeah.
Uh, I
Well,
mean,
and it's like stocks, if you look at just traditional stock trading, a bad day in stocks for a company is you're down 10%. A bad day in crypto is you're down 80% or more. If you just look at the biggest example would probably be BitConnect. That's been the largest one of
exactly. See,
recent
that's
years where,
exactly.
what was that? It was at like $400, something
Yep.
like that. And
It
then
went to,
within 2 days,
yeah,
it was at like
it went
10.
to you couldn't even sell it, so
Yeah.
it was worth zero at that point because I think there's the last exchange just delisted it.
Oh,
I mean, you can't even get that back, and I think that's important. As you know, I mean, the amount of bugs and it you kind of I kind of weigh it back and forth. I have a little bit like I trade around a little bit more just because Block One does have billions of dollars to throw at something to make it work,
mhm.
which is kind of huge. But I think it's just important for people to realize that. I know everything has bugs and doesn't make I mean, look, Bitcoin had their biggest bug since 2000. I don't know if in the beginning 2009, 10, whenever they started really fixing up some of those major ones. Did you catch that bug with a
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
crazy. I mean, that's luckily they found it, but I mean, it kind of shows the need that there needs to be more of a formal, I don't know, verification process on clients and stuff. But being able to inflate something, the supply on something that's supposedly sound money is huge, and it kind of shows that as much as I like to say, and I think everyone else does too, about how great Bitcoin is, right? A hedge against everything else, decoupled from traditional assets, sound money. It's still, I mean, that was a bug that could have allowed, you know, it to inflate. But I think what's different about Bitcoin when that could happen, a fork would have been, it wouldn't have taken as big of a shot from a confidence standpoint as in if there was a new fork, right? They
Yeah.
had to do a whole nother fork. This is the new Bitcoin. Everyone jumps on board. I think more people will jump on board of that. The confidence will be there a lot more so than something like Ripple or even Ethereum too. Well, Ethereum would jump over, but something like Ripple where you have a company behind it, and I don't know. It just seems like it's so much more decentralized, and there's the confidence would follow along with wherever the chain is. It doesn't mean it's still scary, but
It is interesting though, because when that hack did surface last week, someone was talking about how the development of the project should be as stringent and strict as like NASA level checks
mhm.
and verifications on anything that is possibly done to make a change has to be checked and checked and checked and checked and checked over and over by multiple institutions too, because that's the other thing. NASA doesn't work in a vacuum. They have
Mhm.
tons of different agencies that they work with. And the same thing applies to cryptocurrency. So Bitcoin is a little bit shielded in the fact that there are hundreds of developers for it. But when you look at other projects that are out there, particularly some of these that have very large market caps and the teams are 20
Mhm.
developers. And if you're trying to gamble billions of dollars in market cap on 20 people, that's risky. And we've seen this happen multiple times. There's been issues with EOS. There's been the real big issue with IOTA. That was last year that, what was it? MIT was like, oh, hey, by the way, you have this massive security flaw. You should probably fix this. There are not
Yeah.
going to be people out there that are going to be checking your project for you and pointing out these security flaws. There's going to be people that are going to be exploiting them. And so Bitcoin is, I think, a little bit ahead of the pack in that sense that, there is a decent amount of developers that can do these checks that are not associated with anything. Because that's the other issue is that if you look at these projects, their development team is only interested in the project, right? So they're very singularly focused, and they can't look at things from all different angles. Versus when you have hundreds of different developers that are all working on the same project, it spreads that out a little bit more. So it is interesting, and I think that it'll become more apparent as time goes on, especially if we get one of these multi-billion-dollar market cap coins have like a serious security flaw that does get exploited. Because that's the thing. Like there have been some exploits that have happened. I know there was that one with EOS on some decentralized exchange. Was that last week where some people were just creating fake EOS tokens and they stole like $60,000 or something like that, which isn't huge, but if that was something that happened on a larger scale and we see a hack that steals $1 billion worth of tokens, it's going to be a huge issue.
Yeah.
It'll bring that whole Mt. Gox thing back because people will be like, oh, wow. So this is not secure yet. There are still many issues plaguing the systems.
Yeah, it's tough too with something like Bitcoin. There's not really an incentive for developers to go and validate all these clients and really checking this code so thoroughly. That's kind of boring compared to, advancing the protocol, right? I think there's just no incentive for it, right? They can't, something like Bitcoin, they can't just hire, here's 200, here's 50 developers that are only just going to double check and verify the code, right? They can't do that, which I think there's like a new foundation, like B Foundation or something that's supposed to be another non-for-profit, because there's a Bitcoin Foundation that went to shit pretty quickly, but it's supposed to. We'll see what kind of helps it, but I think that's kind of interesting.
But at the same time, that there is a benefit in that the people that are doing the checks and doing all this work on Bitcoin are doing it. The term is stupid, but they are kind of Bitcoin maximalists, right? Where they do it because they want the whole thing to succeed.
Exactly.
And it's not like monetarily driven either. It's just I'm working on this because it's important.
Yeah, exactly. And there was one other news I think we wanted to hit was we kind of talked about it briefly, but kind of how we're talking about all these different competitors for Bitcoin. And I think a lot of people like IOTA. I was excited about IOTA until the network went down for it was down for like 20 minutes. Like the entire network just shut down. It's just scary stuff. People just don't realize that. They just get all excited and they see Bitcoin has a transaction time and price. So they're like, all right, well, this is unacceptable, and they look for something else.
Well, yeah. And that's the thing. Cause IOTA is a really good example of this, of these projects that kind of develop dirty, where they do not check anything. They just push updates. They're like, it's going to be fine. Don't worry about it, guys. And then they're like, oh, our wallet doesn't work. Oh, our entire network is offline. Oh, we have massive security vulnerabilities, which is why I do appreciate some of the other projects in the space that do take it seriously. Cardano is a pretty good example of that. Everyone always complains, oh, when's Cardano going to do anything? It's like they've done nothing for years, and it's been in development for all this time, and you still can't do anything with it. Well, it's because they check everything. It's all peer-reviewed stuff. The way that it should be developed, it takes time. So,
I think that does have a role though too, where I like the idea of go fast and break things, especially in a space like this, where I think some projects do need to do that, right? That's why, as much as a lot of like Bitcoin maximalists, they don't like Ethereum, right? Simply just because of the way the raise happened and the tokens, and it was just the whole thing about how a little bit more, it's more centralized than Bitcoin, for instance, but it's still interesting to see like an experiment on how these different dynamics play out. I don't know enough about the technology to say how those dynamics play out, but it's interesting to see from like the fundamental, like the economic or like community, how it's growing and how it handles like the hard fork with the DOA and everything. But I don't know, DAO, but it's interesting.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And I'm not saying don't go fast and break things, but when your project is the thing that everything else is dependent on, like Ethereum, for instance, when you have, upwards of thousands of projects that will or have been built to work on that network,
Yeah.
you do have a bit of an obligation to make sure that you're not breaking stuff, because there are so many companies and so many livelihoods and so much money dependent on it that does kind of shift it a little bit, versus a project that's small that is being built on something else. By all means, go for
Yeah.
it. do crazy stuff. If it breaks, it breaks. Try and fix it, but you're not risking billions of dollars doing it.
Yeah. Honestly, like a project like Bitcoin, Ethereum, I'm kind of like on the fence about that. But Bitcoin, I mean, I don't know how the development structure is, but I mean, if I was I recommend the developers go slower. I don't care, like go slower. I want my money more sound. I think I think they're pressured, and I think people are just excited. Those developers are excited to push the latest and greatest things. But as people shift from all these different options, because of the limitations of what Bitcoin is, like proof of work, I think it's interesting too, where you shared this thing with me today, yesterday in Cointelegraph. There's Iceland's industry to shift from crypto mining to pure blockchain business. I think that's kind of interesting, because we've seen in the past now that a few countries, I think, was it Iceland? Was it earlier this year or last year that, a few places are actually subsidizing mining?
Yeah.
Get
I
that
know
sort of,
China does, or at least they used to.
yeah.
And it is interesting because it's not just cryptocurrency, right? Like the driving force is cryptocurrency, but the outcomes of it are much broader than that. So, before we went live, we were talking about how much pressure this puts on renewable energy sources to be developed and optimized and made more efficient, because it lowers the cost to mine. And so it's an inherent benefit for miners to push for this. And they themselves are actually some of the biggest players that are pushing for this. So, in Iceland in particular, they've been developing geothermal power, and I think they like, what is it? Genesis is based out of Iceland, and they're, I think, top 3 or 4 mining operations in the world, and they're the largest electricity consumer in all of Iceland. So, it's in their best interest to try and push this as much as possible. And if your number one energy consumer is pulling renewables, that sends a huge signal for the economics of development of this technology. And the other thing is that there's all these lingering effects too of infrastructure for data center support, things like that are based around cryptocurrency, that even if cryptocurrency were to go away, which it's not going to, you still have all this infrastructure left over that can be utilized for tons of different stuff. So it's a net benefit, I think, to be pushing all of this development in not just Iceland, but many countries around the world. Yeah. I know Canada is also a pretty big one.
Yeah. And I don't think we've seen anything yet when it comes to that, just because, how much of a rush it is to how much of a short time preference there is in mining right now. There was in the last 9 or 8 or 9 years, because of how fast the technology developed, right? As a miner, you had to replace your entire rigs after a few months, if that.
Yeah.
Completely. There was just an absolute rush to build, get something running and continually upgrade that. You couldn't worry about, investing, long term with a hard time preference in renewable energy or anything like that. It was quickest you could possibly get a farm up, and because you had a ton of other things to worry about with it changing technology. But now that we're seeing thousands and thousands of percent increases every few months, if not a year, in mining equipment. Now it's you only get a 2 times increase, or a few times increase. So and it's just becoming a little bit not as profitable, which it's still profitable, but there's not that rush, I don't think, anymore. So I think it's going to be a slow shift to that shorter time preference of building a farm, getting as fast as quick as we can, getting as much money as we can, to more of a long-term investment where they'll consider the ramifications of where they're putting it long-term when it comes to renewable energy and investing in the future like that. Just because after nine years now, clearly proof of work works and it's still secure 9 years later. So that every other day that becomes more secure, it just shows that this is going to be here for another 9 years. Every year it just adds another year that it's going to be here, if not longer.
Yeah, and I did see someone post on Twitter that everyone that complains outside looking in that proof of work is so wasteful and it uses so much electricity, and it's like, oh, this is stupid. This is a waste. But it's because we haven't run into anything that tests that, right? Like we haven't run into a situation like globally with the economy where this becomes a very important thing, where you you need that security of being able to validate all of your transactions that have occurred.
Mhm.
And so if we have like a huge economic downturn and we see countries start, you know, cooking their books, so to speak, it'll become much more apparent why proof of work is worth it
Yeah.
and why it's not outrageous to be expending all this energy and money on securing a network.
Mhm.
So I think that'll be interesting when we do run into something like that happening.
Yep. And just a closing note, we've been live for like 25 minutes, but
Yep.
and just for anyone that still thinks proof of work is inefficient, I mean, it's still less than people spend lighting up their houses with Christmas tree lights a year. So that's just, let's put that in perspective first of all before
Yeah.
we freak out and jump to another technology that is completely untested and unproven. But I mean, I don't know if you have anything else to say. That was a pretty good episode. We're probably going to start trying doing these every other day, just because I like being able to talk about multiple news items instead of just like the one that happens.
Yeah.
Give it a few days, give it another extra day to get a few items. We can really take a look and digest them a little bit more. But
Yep.
yeah, if you're interested in learning, feel free to take the disruptive course. We teach pretty much everything, the fundamentals, so you can at least understand what we're talking about for the most part. And in the forum where you can ask us questions and we'll respond. So until next time.
See ya.